Hello and welcome back to this video series. We're talking about Centrify Infrastructure Services and the Privilege Service component. This is the customer hosted version of it that uses Windows Failover clustering for high availability. And in the previous video series, we actually did administrative failovers. We failed for maintenance, for upgrade, for backups, for connectors, and we were able to prove that we can maintain high availability. But in this case, we're going to start talking about software failure. And the most important thing to understand is how the cluster's policies are laid out. As you know, Windows failover clustering has these roles that you can define, and that's the way you define the privilege service as a generic script. If you look at the dependencies for this particular service, you have the shared storage, because that's where the database is. You have the web service and database service, and the DNS name of the service in the network. And here, this is a healthy cluster right now, and it's running on the node called member2. So what I want to also take a look is, depending on the component, you have to look at the policy, because when you're testing this, it's about understanding what the behavior should be. I have been doing a lot of testing, but what it says here, if I look at the properties, I can look at the advanced policies. This defines the polling interval, right? So it would be every 5 seconds, right? So at a maximum, something should happen within 5 seconds. And this is what it says here. So if any of the resources, in this case my web service or my database, were to fail in a interval of 15 minutes, the first time it fails, it will fail over. It actually will restart the service. The second time it fails, if it's within that 15-minute interval, it will actually fail over to another node, right? This is what's important about this type of testing. You need to, the testing is relatively simple, but it's understanding how the policy is laid out and what is the action and what is the expected outcome of the test. So, for example, I have laid out here already what I want to happen. I've checked the privilege. Actually, as a matter of fact, we can actually do it here. So I've let's check the status of the web service and the active node right now. And it's I can record the command. So it's this command, right? So notice that it's running right now, but I'm going to just pipe it to stop it. So the expectation based on policy is that it should restart the service in that same node. So I'm going to quickly send a stop command, and then I'm going to check the status again. Notice that it stopped, right? So based on the policy, my expectation is, and if you saw the screen, it actually quickly flickered here because it's already happened. My expectation is that the service is going to be restarted. So if I go and check it out, notice that it's running, and you can always go back to the cluster and look at the cluster events, right? So most likely, notice that it's right there saying, hey, that the generic script failed. That is the actual service. And the description here will tell you, well, based on the policy, some actions may happen. In this case, the actions happen exactly as I expected. But if I wanted to, for example, do something else within the 15 minutes, my expectation is that this changes nodes. So let's try it. So let's try it with the database service, and notice that it's running. And we're going to do a pipe. Look at the right here. This should flicker, or right here you'll see the changes right away. So let's take a look. Press enter. So my expectation here is that within 5 seconds, notice it happened real quickly here. So it's actually failing over to member 4 because, and this is where, the rule said that within the first time it fails in a 15-minute interval, it will restart the service in that particular node. And if there's an additional failure within that 15-minute period, it will actually send the service to another node, in this case member 4. So let's take a look at the status. So my status, actually, if I look at member 2, it should be stopped, right? But let's look at member 4. Um, as you can see, it's actually running, right? This means that if I look at my system here, I can just refresh it. And obviously, the speed in which the services come up, right? You have VN contention if you have hardware, much better. But again, ultimately, the idea here is to maintain always on connectivity. So notice that now I'm in member 4. So this explains software failure, right? And we talked about the dependent service like the web service or the database service.